In this update, we've got Hurricane Lee making landfall tomorrow at the same time. Yet we have another storm system trailing back behind it, newly developed tropical depression number 15, expected to be taking the name Nigel, and that will be continued to lift northwest as well. In the middle of the country, across the southern plains, we've been seeing these active short waves be coming across, yet we have another one later on this evening that's going to be kicking off a round of showers and thunderstorms, and some of those could turn severe. So let's highlight the latest update from the National Hurricane Center on this newly developed tropical depression number 15. It is moving northwest at 12 miles an hour, is expected to again rapidly intensify to become a hurricane sometime on Sunday, and then that continues to intensify, likely to become a major hurricane by the time we head into Tuesday morning, and then continue on its trek northwest and likely getting dangerously close to Bermuda. So you definitely have to keep weather aware in Bermuda from this dangerous system, as this is expected to continue to rapidly intensify. But yes, later on this afternoon into the evening time frame, that shortwave is going to cause yet another burst of energy, and that produces some showers and thunderstorms, and some of those could turn severe with some damaging winds and some larger hail associated in and around the Amarillo region, back into Midland, getting into Lubbock. That gets in even into portions of the San Antonio region and into San Angelo, and likely starting to kind of die down once they get as far into the Houston metroplex. But if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel, and I would love to reach 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and following all my daily content. But let's look at the temperatures this afternoon. This was the cold front we've been highlighting. These areas have experienced some really nice, pleasant conditions over the last 3, 4, 5 days. In fact, we probably have another day of it. But yeah, this afternoon, they're checking in with nice temperatures across a good part of the country. We got widespread 50s and 60s in the highlighted in the green areas. And you swing even further south, those areas down in the 70s. We're talking high temperatures, folks. So I think we've got one more day of it, but things are going to be starting to heat up, especially in the middle of the country. But now let's take a look at Lee. So we've been talking about Lee for a long time, probably about 10 days on this channel. And the thing about Lee now, it is just massive. I mean, we've got tropical storm force winds extending literally 300 miles from the center. It is still a hurricane, folks. It's an 80-mile-per-hour hurricane. It's moving north-northeast about 18 miles an hour. This will continue on that trek and likely make landfall as probably a tropical storm, about a 65-mile-per-hour tropical storm, likely near the St. John region in Nova Scotia. Well, they do have, tropical storm, watches and warnings in place, and all into the Gulf of Maine here. And like I mentioned, with those winds extending 300 miles out from the center, you're going to get tropical storm force wind gust anywhere from Nantucket all the way through the Boston region and getting up all the way into Maine. So yes, but it is expected to finally make landfall heading into tomorrow afternoon, into tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon time frame near the St. John region, and that will continue to lift northeast and really race out into the open water. So let's take a look at some of those winds, because I mean, it's still going to have a pretty significant eye as it just keeps expanding, as it keeps accelerating into forward speed. Yes, those tropical storm force wind gusts could extend literally from Rhode Island, getting into Nantucket, all the way in the Boston region and back into Portland and to Banger. Those areas could see some higher wind gusts. In fact, let's take a look at some of those wind gust potentials as we get into tomorrow morning. And yeah, some of those, up to tropical storm force winds, 37 miles an hour there in Providence, maybe 50 miles an hour in Boston. We get towards off the Cape here, a little bit higher gusts. Some of those could be upwards to 60 miles an hour, even portions of New York City back into the 30-mile-per-hour range. But further north, as you obviously get closer to that eye, tomorrow afternoon, yes, about 58 miles per hour up there in Portland, and there's Banger into 58 miles an hour. And yeah, this will continue into the St. John's region, likely getting into that 60, 65 mile per hour range as hurricane, as tropical storm force wind gust will be impacting those regions. But let's break down the rainfall over the next 48 hours. Those little short waves are going to be coming across. I think you've got one today, and I think you're going to actually have another one tomorrow. So if you add all that up, it's going to be ringing out some more rain, definitely some beneficial rains. Not everybody's getting it, but the places that do get it are going to be really happy, and with a pretty good soaking in some of these areas, could have some, pretty good downpours. Unfortunately, it is going to come in the form of some severe weather and some, larger hail associated with these. And I think you're going to have more severe weather on the table, especially across this region into, next week with the big warm up. And I think we're going to have a pretty good trough coming in off the West Coast, and we're going to break down those details. So here's the setup going into Sundays. That's when I think the warm up starts to begin. So you have all those cooler conditions that they're finally going to be subsiding with this ridge trying to move back in across the middle of the country. This trough sort of moves out. We are going to have a pretty deepening low pressure center off the West Coast, and that's going to have some cold air with it, trust me. But we have a more significant system that's going to be trailing back behind it, and that's going to be diving down and bringing its own instability as well, and could bring out some rain showers in portions of California and getting into the Oregon region. But before that happens, underneath that trough, we still got some instability. That little short waves now going to be highlighted across portions of Illinois back into Indiana region. That actually gets into West Virginia, goes as far south as in the Georgia region into South Carolina. And then of course there's the rain coming from what will be Lee, and we can finally say goodbye to Lee after we get into the day on going into Sunday. Here's the setup for Tuesday, right? So we've got that little low pressure center that's off the West Coast, and this really has some colder air with it as well. This one doesn't really have much rain associated with it. I think the one dropping further south that really gets active by the time we head into Friday, I think will have a lot more rain associated with it, but it stays definitely on the cooler side. There's no question. Here's that one that we talked about. It really starts to wrap up, and this is probably the biggest trough we've seen, heading into fall. We're going into that second phase of severe weather, so we've got to be concerned about whenever we have a trough likely setting up out west and a warm up in the middle of the country. That always spells instability. You tap into some of that moisture, higher dew points, and you're gonna have some severe weather under that atmosphere. And I think that's exactly what's going to happen as we get deeper into next week, because we'll have these pulses of energy that kind of come across, setting the stage, and you'll have that lift associated with them as well. That's going to be producing showers and thunderstorms. But look at the cold air, folks. I mean, that's that little cold core. It's really tight and compacted. So if you're underneath that, you're going to feel it in a big way. You're talking 20, 25 degrees below average temperatures, and the rest of the country, the middle part of the country, the areas that have really taken advantage of that cool down are actually going to be seeing a kind of a rapid warm up. Instead of 10, 15, 20 degrees below average, you're going to be the opposite. 5, 10, 15 degrees above average in a lot of these areas. And that's going to fuel the atmosphere. So once this trough hits that air mass, you're likely going to be seeing some more severe weather across the central plains. So, but here's the temperatures, right? Underneath those below average anomalies, here's the actual high temperatures as we go into Thursday. Yeah, that's 40s showing up on the map, folks. That's downright jacket weather, right? I mean, it's cold. It's definitely colder, and it feels colder because your body's been so used to the warmer weather. And that first initial cold blast, that fall blast, it's going to hit you, and it's going to feel a lot colder than it normally was once you start getting acclimated to the cooler times ahead. But yeah, nonetheless, I mean, you're talking 50s for high temperatures as you head into your Thursday afternoon. But once that instability hits the middle of the country, after you have that ridge moving into the middle of the country, the temperatures start to warm up. It also opens up the Gulf of Mexico, and that produces more humidity, higher dew points, whenever you see the dew points in those purplish shaded areas into the 70s, that's a lot of moisture in that atmosphere. And then you have that lift coming in off the west. That's going to be likely producing rounds of showers and thunderstorms, and some of those are going to be turning severe. So most of the instability is actually going to be across the middle of the country, and they've got some pretty high Cape values too. So we're going to get in that time, that second half. We're heading into that, September 15th time frame through typically around a Halloween. It can get pretty bumpy around with that second phase of severe weather, and it's likely going to be taking shape starting in the day on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and especially across portions of Oklahoma into Kansas and in Nebraska. Those are the favorite areas likely to see severe weather next week. And the breakdown looks like this. Here's the setup on Tuesday across the Texas Panhandle into Oklahoma, into Kansas, into Nebraska. Kind of the same area goes into Wednesday, Thursday, and yet Friday. So you're going to have, again, these pulses of energy that come across out west with the more active subtropical jet stream. Then you have the trough out west, the ridge in the middle, and once that system gets a little bit closer, it's going to be adding to fueling these storms. So we'll be having to watch these storms and see if they get too far out of hand. But there's the trough, right? So we got a pretty good setup, and whenever you kind of see this and say, uh-oh, we're going into that second phase of severe weather. So you got the trough coming in with that pretty good system coming in out west, dropping those temperatures, but at the same time you've got that ridge built in across the middle of the country, and that adds fuel to the fire across the middle of the country. And we'll have to be concerned about this area heading in the next week for severe weather. But it's going to be bringing some beneficial rains. Unfortunately, it has some larger hail associated with it, but it's definitely going to bring some added beneficial rains to these areas that really kind of need it across Oklahoma into Kansas, as far as into Nebraska. But most of the rain, at least the heaviest rain, is really draped across the middle of the country. But there's rainfall coming in from the Pacific Northwest. You've been pretty dry, but that second system is not the first one, but the second one. It does appear we'll have a little bit more unsettled conditions with it, and you might be enough to wring out the moisture out of that and produce some showers and thunderstorms across these regions headed into that Thursday, Friday time frame of next week. Of course, there's the rain that will come in from Lee, and then we also have another little low pressure center close off the Florida coast here into Georgia, into the Carolinas, that adds some heavier rains, especially along for those coastal regions. But let's zoom out to the tropics again, because we do have, it's that Nigel coming in off into the Atlantic, and most of the ensembles, even more so, take it more out to sea. It follows kind of a similar path that Lee actually took, but it's going to be turning much sooner out to sea. So this one will be like no question that it's not going to hit, not even come close actually to the United States, as they're going to turn well out to sea well ahead of time. So there's definitely nothing to be concerned about that one. But as we get deeper into the end of the month, right? So we get deeper than in the month, we start to look at some of these ensemble guidance, and there's starting to appear several members starting to show up, a little low pressures coming in off maybe some of these areas that could have some sort of crossover effect from the Eastern Pacific. But this area down here in the Bay of Campeche into the Caribbean, into the southern Gulf of Mexico, we've got to be a little bit concerned about it, especially when the Climate Prediction Center kind of highlights this area as possibly a favorite area to kind of watch for possible tropical cyclone potential probability. Now, again, this is a pretty far out. So we've got Nigel to contend with, but I do feel it's going to be staying well out of the open waters. But this is the one system, later on down the line that we have to look out for this area around the 27th time frame through October 3rd time frame, maybe even kind of lowering the pressures. Remember, it's really going to start warming up in the middle of the country, especially over the top in southern Canada and the Great Lakes region. So that typically lowers the pressures underneath, and that's why I think the Climate Prediction Center has this area highlighted, because we could be looking at some lowering pressures in that area by the time we head into that September 27th and October 3rd time frame. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video, definitely hit the subscribe button and catch my next update while I protect you before and after the storm.